Absolute Emperor Napoleonic Wargame Battles by Boyd Bruce, part of the Osprey Blue Book series. We generated this handy little 110-point scenario. Actually, once you factor in the boss men, it's more like 145 to 146 points. Last week, I showed you how we set up the forces, how we set up the terrain, and how we wound up with a fairly balanced engagement. The only thing that we had to add, the only little wrinkle, is a shot clock. We want to make sure that these French understand that time is of the essence. Now, our commanders, using the Battle of Bumville, the tutorial scenarios, 1, 2, and 3, from this book, we deduced that the ideal situation is to have our commanders set up 9 inches apart. Because we have a slightly larger table, we've set them up 12 inches apart. However, the battles of Bumville are typically 8-turn affairs. We're going to give the French 10 turns to take the hill. Maybe. They have at most 10 turns. At the end of the 10th turn, we are going to roll a d6, and if the result is a 5 or greater, the game is over. If we keep playing, on every turn, that number goes down by 1, so they need to roll a 4 or better on 11 in order to have another turn. They need to roll a 3 or better on turn 12, and so on and so forth. I think you can do the math. I think we're ready to play the Battle of Big Hill. Except, as usual, I kind of forgot. The infantry for the British are seasoned. The infantry for the British are veteran. The cavalry are seasoned. What's the difference, I hear you ask? Veteran units activate, fight, shoot. Everything they do is going to be on a 3-up. Seasoned units will be successful on a 4-up. For their part, the French are looking at 1 seasoned heavy cavalry. Again, seasoned will activate on a 4-up, and they've got 3 veteran infantry. They're going to send these 2 attack columns up this way. They're going to leave this one back for mobile reserve, maybe protect that flank, and then we don't actually use artillery. They have a slightly different effect. Basically, they are all treated as conscripts. They hit on 5-ups. They're only going to roll 1 dice in melee, but they roll 2 dice when they shoot, kind of. They roll 2 dice, and if they're shooting at up to, if they shoot up to 3 inches, they can do 2 hits. But they also have a range of 9 inches. They'll take the higher. So if they're shooting at a unit that's 9 inches away, we roll 2 dice. They take the higher. The 4 is still a miss. They're looking for 5s. But if they are shooting at close range and they roll a pair of 5s to within 3, they're going to wind up doing 2 hits on that. I think now we really are ready to go. The attacker takes the first turn. And on that turn, the one thing I'm going to show you is this artillery unit starts out the game limbered up, which means he can move 3 inches. They get 2 actions, so he can move to here, and he can then unlimber, so he is ready to fire, but that's his second action. That's all he can do. Let me move the rest of these guys. At the end of the turn, by the way, we got a little shot clock here. It is turn number 1. We'll put that down kind of in the corner here, so it's a bit unobtrusive. As you can see, the British have decided to swing one of their cavalry units around this side. That's the only movement they did. But the French got to go first. I changed my mind. We brought the cannon up to this point, and we've brought... Now, in Absolute Emperor, at the start of your turn, you have a free formation change. You move at the speed of that new formation. So the French didn't have to start in column. They just changed formation to column, and then these guys can move a total of 8 inches on the march, but they have to stay within 4 inches of this guy. So if we bring them up, they can probably come up more like that. But they are going to be limited. Our commander only moves 4 inches per turn. That's the other thing we have to be aware of, is that these guys have to stay within 4 inches. We're good. We're good. So we move on to turn number 2. On every turn, you have to pay attention to the elan of the respective commanders. The commander with a higher elan gets to go first. If they're tied, the main rules don't provide any guidance, so we're going to go with the standard scenario setup that this force with the most units on the table will get to go first. The other fun little wrinkle is that, and I didn't realize this last turn, you're supposed to start and go from right to left for your units, which means, but you got to think about it. We're going to bring our commander up to here, and, or do you? Well, we're going to bring these guys up to here. I know they can move a lot further, but I'm concerned. Here's what we're going to do as a solo wargamer. I'm concerned about them being out of command. What we're going to do is we're going to bring these guys are going to form line. You can interpenetrate freely. So they're going to form line, and they're going to only be able to move 2 inches. So we're going to bring them up like this. These guys likewise are going to form line. We're going to leave a little bit of space between them. And now we are ready to attack. On this side of the table, I'm going to go ahead and bring these guys up. Now, they can do a formation change automatically. If they don't shoot this turn, they can automatically form square. And that's what I'm anticipating is going to happen. That we're going to move them up to here. And that's, oh, so we go these guys, these guys, these guys. And then, you know, I'm kind of regretting not... Oh, and then our commander, of course, is going to come up 4 inches to there. And then this guy is... So is everybody still within 4 inches? Oh, he's got to come over this way a little bit more. We got to make sure those guys are within our command radius. And see, I'm already kind of cheating here. I moved him to here because I'm going from right to left. Let's do this. Your forces all have to move from right to left. Your commander moves at the end of the turn, and then you check to ensure that everybody is still within his command radius. So these guys are 9 inches apart. If we put them right smack in the middle, because it's a 1-inch base, we should be able to get ourselves into a position where somebody is... Oh, somebody. Pull them back just a little bit. Because if you're not in... So there's your 4 inches. If you're not in command... You have to move on the next turn to get into command, which means these guys who are ordered to come around here, if they are too far away from the commander at the end of the French turn, then the next turn, rather than attacking, they're going to wind up having to move, you know, in a direction they don't want to in order to maintain command. Now we're on to the British movement turn, and as I said, this cavalry unit wants to charge. They're only 4 inches away. They are in line. They can do that. So we're going to have a charge here. And then these guys are going to go into line and move 4 inches up to here. So they're swinging around, and we're going to have a cavalry fight over here on this right flank. But again, remember they have to stay within 4 inches of their boss man. They were right about there, so that's probably about as far as they can go. They also have to worry about these guys coming up and taking a shot at them, because if these guys can shoot, if the French infantry opt to blast these guys so they lose the fight, then our heavy cavalry will be able to charge into melee. At least that's the thinking. And of course, our guys are British in a defensive position. They're not going to leave that defensive position. Shooting phase comes next. Nobody wants to shoot, or they're not in range. As you can see, 2 inches is the range. It's very small. Very small battlefield. These guys, however, do want to form square. Units that have not fired can form square, and as you might expect, it puts you very vulnerable to artillery and infantry shooting, but they're far enough away, and it really helps protect you from cavalry charges. This little formation puts the British in a tight spot. If these guys come down, they can shoot these guys to ribbons, but that will have to wait till next turn, because we are on the charge phase, and our squadron, our cavalry, are opting not... Well, are they allowed to opt not to charge? The British cavalry would prefer not to charge these guys. In melee, cavalry fighting a square only roll 1d6. Infantry fighting cavalry, when the infantry are in square, roll 3d6. So 3-1, not a great advantage. That's the only unit we've got in charge range. It's 4 inches there, and then these guys are just shy of 4 inches away. So we are done with turn number 2. We move on to turn number 3. And once again, the French have the advantage. So the first thing we want to do is bring these guys into line. And then we will go ahead and move them up just 2 inches. Well, you have to stop within 2 inches. So we'll bring them up to the 2. That is, or is it 1 inch? I can't remember. I'll check that in a second. We're going to leave them right there, and then these guys may decide to move up. But again, we're moving from right to left, and then I guess when you've got 2 guys that are lined up, we'll go, front to back. So these guys then can swing up 2 inches, so they will be within 2 inches of the unit on the hill here. These guys will also move up the 2 inches to here. And then our cannon is going to move a total of 6 inches over to here. Now that uses all of their movement. These guys aren't going to move at all either, and so we have to measure. We're going to slide this guy over just that little bit. 4 inches to there. Everybody's in command, so we're good on the French side. No unit can close closer than 2 inches to any other unit, so that means these guys have to back up just a little bit. That's the interaction zone. So we'll back them up, back them off. He's got to come over this way just a little bit more. In fact, he's got to stay between these guys. So we'll do that. We'll leave him right there. On their part, the only movement that the British had this time, since these guys can't charge forward until the charge phase, the British have decided to refuse this flank, and they formed line of march and moved 8 inches around this way. They would love to have charged through here. Unfortunately, because of that 2-inch interaction zone, and there's only 3 inches between the square and here, they would have to form line, and then they would be very vulnerable. So instead of doing that, even if they could form squadron, they'd be okay, but there just isn't enough room. So they're going to swing around and back these guys up. And then the next order of business is going to be shooting combat. We only have one shooting event, and that's going to be the gunplay between these 2 units. The yellow dice will be for the French. Now, the French are shooting uphill, so they lose 1 die. Put that aside. The British are shooting downhill. They're going to be rolling 4 dice. And we also need to look at the French are seasoned, so they're going to be hitting on a 4-up, whereas the British are veteran, so they're going to be hitting on 3-ups. So the white dice are 3-ups, the yellow dice are 4-ups. Let's see how many hits we get. The British get 3, and the French get 2. And that's what these tiny little red dice are for. In the case of commanders, it shows the elan. In the case of the units, it shows, and we'll try to keep that in the center of the unit, it shows how many hits they have taken. Then we got to work on our charges, and of course, we've got 1 charge that we need to work out down here between the heavy cavalry versus the line cavalry. When you have a counter-charge situation, you need to roll a d6 for both sides. These are both seasoned units. They both need to roll a 4 in order to charge. On a 1, 2, or 3, they're going to stand there like dopes. The French have charged, and the British, with a result of a 1, have decided to be intimidated by this heavy horseflesh riding them down. Maybe it's because the British are line. That's going to be important for the next order of business, which is melee, and this is the only melee we've got. That is not such a bad thing for them. Line cavalry do not receive that bonus for countercharging heavy cavalry. That's one of the things the extra points are spent on. The other issue is the heavy cavalry do get to reroll 1 miss on this combat. Once again, they are all seasoned, so they are all hitting on 4s. And that's cocked. We're going to reroll that one. And that's a 1. So the British deliver 2 hits, and the French deliver 1, but remember they get a reroll, and on the reroll, they get 2 hits. So it's going to be 2 versus 2. All that heavy charging wound up with not such an impressive result after all, did it? 2 and 2. Probably should have done this a little earlier. In the shooting phase, 2 hits causes a unit to become halted. 3 hits causes a unit to be disordered. A disordered unit will move back 1 inch, like so. We'll bring him forward. And then over here, both of these cavalry units are also going to be halted. So I use the little white smoke to show what the issue is. Then, I think that's it. Halted units cannot move, change formation, or charge. Oh, they can form emergency square. Temporary disorder, redressing the lines, perfectly capable of engaging in shooting or combat. They just cannot charge. Unit receives a waiver test, but that doesn't happen unless you take 5 hits, so we won't worry about that right now. The last thing we do is, that's the end of the turn. So we move on to turn number 4. It's still going to be the French going first, but we have to do the command phase. And in the command phase, everybody improves by 1 step. So all of our disordered become halted, and all of our halted become standard. What's the word for non-halted? I don't know if there is one. I'm not going to look it up right now. It's still the French get to go first, since these guys are halted. Now, we could spend an elan to make them not halted, but instead, I think we'll go ahead and just, take a breath, because we do have a cannon that can spin like this, and he can fire straight ahead with his second action. We also have a unit over here that can make a free formation change. We will put them in a line, and I always like to kind of keep it center on center, and then we'll move them up the 2 inches, which, they're going to have to stop right there, because they are within 2 inches of this unit. So now that we've got an open side over there, we're ready to go. And since these guys are halted, they can't come through. So we went right to left. Now again, on the British side, we have to go right to left. And what do? Do we want these guys to come around here? I don't think so. The fact that, by the way, we've got a river back here that's going to complicate matters somewhat. That is uncrossable. So I think what we'll do is bring these guys straight over to here. Are they within 4 inches of the commander? They are. We'll stop them right there, with the idea that on the next turn they can rotate. And if we can take care of this heavy cavalry, I think maybe we'll be okay. That's kind of the thinking anyway. That is the end of the command phase, the end of the movement phase. So then we move on to the shooting phase. And once again, we're going to have shooting back and forth here with the British hitting on 3s and the French hitting on 4s. The British, and I'm always going to use the yellow dice for the French. So the French are going to score 3 hits. The British are going to score 2 hits. So they are going to be halted with 2. They are going to be forced to withdraw because they took those 3 hits. I was wrong. On shooting, 2 hits is simply halted. That's it. We've got a melee. That's it for shooting. No, we do have one more shot here. This cannon is going to be firing at, and I kind of wish I would have brought him up a little bit more. If I brought him up just a half an inch this turn. Are we going to allow that? Yeah, I want to see what happens. We're going to bring them up to here and then unlimber. That's their second action. So they can't shoot this turn, but man, next turn, are they really going to start having some effect? We have to do this combat down here. And again, now nobody charged, so it's going to be 4 dice versus 4 dice. Everybody hitting on 4s, with the yellow dice getting the 1 reroll for the French, who only missed once. They're going to get a total of 4 hits. But the British are going to get, for their part, 3 hits. I forgot something. On the last turn, let's try and get it right. It's turn 3. When you fail to defeat your opponent, you withdraw to your rear. And you have to withdraw 4 inches. So we're going to leave these guys to swing around to there, which means these guys can't move, and they're separated by 4 inches. The British will, of course, move up 4 inches, the French, rather. They got to stay close to him, right? So they'll move up as far as they can to put as much pressure on these guys as possible. And the reason we do this is because then, let's see, so with 8 inches of separation, they can only move 4 inches. So these guys can only come up, basically, I think the 2 inches, it's going to look a little something like this. Okay? We need to rerun this combat because at 2 inches apart, they are going to have to redo those charge checks. And on a 5 and a 4, both sides charge. They meet in the middle. And then we have to roll the 5 yellows versus the 4 whites. So a bit of a save for the British on that one. The 5 yellows, I've only rolled 3 so far. So I'm going to re-roll. That's the 1 miss. They're going to have to live with whatever these 2 dice are. So they get a total of 5 hits altogether to 2 for the British. That means these guys are halted because they took 2 wounds. They are now down to 4. And then with 5 hits, now what I do to just kind of make it obvious, I'm going to put a second die on these. They're up to 7 now. Don't worry about what the numbers are. They're at 7. And it gets even worse for them because when you take 5 hits in melee, you have to take a waiver test in addition to withdrawing the 4 inches. Now, they don't actually have 4 inches to withdraw, do they? Because they're going to wind up running into one of their allied units. A cavalry that forces its opponent to withdraw immediately makes a follow-up charge. We're going to swing them around, something like that. Can we just ignore this river, please? I know it's supposed to be there, but it makes things awkward. We're going to bring them back 4 inches. These guys are... Well, I don't get it, guys. Are they halted, or do they immediately make that follow-up? All right, they only took 2 hits. They're not halted. It takes 3 hits in melee, which means they will be able to follow-up charge. That does cost them 1 hit point. They are now at 5, which lowers them from a 4-up unit to a 5-up unit. These guys are also reduced to a 5-up unit. We are going to conduct another round of combat. And again, the heavy cavalry have charge, so they're going to be rolling 5 dice, 4 plus the bonus charge, and they get to re-roll. And oh, by the way, these guys, if they take 1 hit, they're dead. So hitting on 5s, the heavy cavalry gets 1 hit, and that means this unit is wiped out. But not before they hit on 5s as well, doing 2 more hits to this unit. So now the heavy cavalry, although they have 1 here, they are down to just 1 more hit point. They conducted 1 follow-up charge, so they're not going to be able to conduct another, which is good for the second-line infantry. And I think if you are the British, you have to be satisfied with that result. And if you're French, you have to be annoyed that I just ignored the river so I could actually see what happens when this happens. That is the end of the turn. We move on to turn number 5. And we do our command phase. These guys are out of command. Well, first we remove all of these. You see how they're more than 4 inches away? That's kind of a big... No, I got that wrong again. I just went back and reread it. If a cavalry forces its opponent to withdraw, they get 1 charge. But if you destroy your opponent, you get to make another follow-up charge. And now, but this is interesting. This follow-up charge takes them into contact with a unit that is in column march. So the line infantry the cavalry are only going to get to roll 1 die. Oh, Lord. This might go better for the French than I expected. The French are only hitting on 5s. They're going to get 3 hits. But the fresh cavalry are going to get that 1 hit that will destroy this unit. But not before taking 3 hits of their own. And because they destroyed a unit, do they get to make that follow-up charge? I think they do, so we'll take that bonus of... is it a cavalry unit? Oh, I forgot to do the reroll on the 1 miss. So that's actually going to be a total of 4 hits on this guy. And cavalry that destroy the unit make another charge straight ahead. If there's another target unit in range, oh, there's not. So they won't do that. But we do have to consider that they took 4 hits, which means they recoil 1 inch and become disordered. Cavalry units withdraw and become disordered. Withdrawal, they are going to move back 4 inches. Fortunately, it's a 4-inch long unit, so they're going to move right back to there. And they are halted. Okay, now we move on to turn 5, and the halt marker comes off. And, oh, look at this. Now they have an interesting option. Well, the first thing we got to do is we worry about movement. So we're going to bring these guys up 2 inches. So we can do some shooting. These guys are... are they close enough to charge these fellas? Not quite yet. But we're going to put them in a line. And we're going to bring them up to that 2-inch. Like so. So they are now just 2 inches away from these guys. And so they have to be... So in order to get the flank march, in order to hit these guys in the flank, they would have to be completely behind a line that looks like that. So in order to get there, you know, if they move... Well, you know what they could do is stay in column and move... Where's the 4-inch? But that would put them out of command. So yeah, this is really the only thing they can do. If we didn't have to stay within 4 inches of this guy, we could move them out here in column and then turn and maybe hit these guys even in the rear. But because they got to stay in this guy's command radius, we're just going to leave them right there. Besides, they got 4 hits already. So I think we'll take it. But what that means is, I'm not quite sure what it means yet. Let's do shooting first. We have a couple of even Stevens, 4 versus 4. And remember that this is going to... Actually, it's not even because the white dice are going to be hitting on 5s. The yellow dice will be hitting on 4s. Veterans hit on... I'm sorry. The French are hitting on 3s. The British are hitting on 4s. And it's just 4 versus 4. The French are going to score 2 hits to 1 hit for the British, at least in this firefight. And the 2, so this becomes 4. This becomes 4. And 2 hits here, this becomes 5. So this unit is now going to be hitting on 4s as well. So that was 2 and 2. And on 2 hits and 2 hits. Man, I really wish I had a quick reference sheet for this so I didn't have to keep thumbing through the book to remember all these. I guess I'm gonna have to make my own quick reference sheet again. I'm surprised that not enough people play this game. Why do I keep having to making these things? They're great. Who doesn't like quick reference sheets? In shooting, 2 hits causes a unit to become halted. So both of these guys are merely halted. Then we've got this shot over here. Again, it's 4 on 4. The white dice are hitting on 5s. The white dice are hitting on 4s rather. The white dice are going to give us 2 shots, and the yellow dice are going to be hitting on 3s. So 4 hits on this guy takes him up to 6, and 2 hits over here is going to bring them to 4, and they are going to be halted. And things are going to get really ugly for them because they shot. They are not, well, they might not be able to form square. These guys took a beating in shooting. 4 hits causes a unit to become disordered. The unit cannot move, charge, or shoot. And that is what this red marker is for. Then we have one last shooting to go here. The cannon is going to fire at this unit. They are going to be able to do 2 dice, hitting on 5s. And they get 1 more shot, which reduces these guys down to just 5 hit points. Then we got to come over here where we've got a charge, and this cavalry is going to charge this infantry. Infantry fighting. Now, the infantry cannot countercharge because they are halted. Infantry fighting cavalry only get 1d6. Cavalry attacking infantry in line get 4d6 plus a bonus of 2 dice because they're cavalry, plus an extra bonus of 1d6 because they charge. Oh, baby. This is not going to go well. You're cocked. We're going to re-roll you. Same thing with you. I don't care. We're going to call that 4 and a 5 because I'll be rolling all day. The infantry do no damage. The cavalry, remember, are hitting on 4s. Is it 4s? Let me double check my roster over here. The British are using seasoned, which is a 4+. They are going to do a grand total of 1, 2, 3 damage because they're on the 4+. Those 3 damage will put the infantry at 7, and because they took 3 hits in combat, they will recoil 1 inch and become disordered. So they fall back to here, and we replace this with a red one to show the disorder. And, oh yeah, remember what happens when cavalry force a recoil? Cavalry that do not, cavalry units that force an opponent cavalry to withdraw must charge. The loss of this cavalry unit means the British commander's elan goes down to 4. The loss of the heavy cavalry reduces the British commander's, or the French commander's elan to 4 as well. Infantry that are defeated by cavalry are not in square, that lose to cavalry are destroyed and removed from play. Well, they lost, but what does it mean to lose? That you took more hits than the other guy? I assume so. What that means is our French commander's elan goes down to 3. And then that is the end of the turn. Moving on to the next command phase, everybody improves by 1 step. Nobody's halted. This guy will remain halted. He cannot move. We are going to... First thing we're going to do is advance the counter by 6. There we go. We are on turn number 6. Why don't we go ahead? They get a free... He's right there. Let's go ahead and swing them around this way. They're going to go into column and move 3 inches to try and get around. Now that that's opened up, in retrospect, we would have been better to leave them over here to begin with, huh? A little less crowded over here. That's going to be it for the movement for the French. Then for the British, they say, you know what? We are more than happy to meet you out here in combat. Give me 4 inches from my commander. And that's about as close as we can get for right now. But I think... You know what? Let's swing them around like this. Because they may be able to form squadron and charge over here as well. That's going to be it for the moving. Now we got to do some more shooting. And in this case, we're going to be hitting on 5s now because they're reduced. And likewise, these guys are reduced. So they're going to be hitting on... the British are going to be hitting on 5s. It's veteran infantry versus veteran infantry. All right, so everybody is going to... Did I get that wrong on a couple of these? Everybody's hitting on 4s now. Because they've... At least on this side, everybody's hitting on 4s. And it's just 4 dice versus 4 dice. The British are going to get 3 hits. That's going to wipe this unit out. And now you're supposed to be on 5. These guys no longer have a shot. Okay. That's it for the shooting. And then we have a charge. Do we have a charge over here? No, they're outside of charge radius. Okay. So, this becomes unhalted. We'll move on to the next turn. And come to think of it, I think the British should have moved first last turn. It is turn number 7. And the... British are going to have to go first. This unit will move up to the limit of their command. And this unit can move 2 inches, so they have to slide on over to here in order to deal with this threat. This takes us to turn number 7, and I've moved... The British have a... Well, let's see. He had 4 units to start. He should be on 3 elan with the loss of that other infantry. These guys should also have 6 casualties. There we go. With more units on the field, the French are going to get to go first. These guys are going to form line, and then they will move to 1-2 inches, something like that. The squadron, I already moved them up first. I'm not sure why. The cannon over here is going to stay put because they have a shot. So we have plenty of shooting, and it's going to be a 4 versus 4 here to start things off. Everybody is hitting on 4s in this case. They're veterans, but they're both at half strength. So the French are going to do, and with just the 2 hits, that's going to end things for them. The British are only going to do 1 hit to this infantry unit, and that is not going to be enough. So we remove this unit. The French infantry is down to 6, and this cavalry now has a choice to make. If they charge these guys, they'll just form square. So that's not going to happen. The good news is those guys are beyond 2 inches, and really, I think the scenario is pretty much over. Because the only other shooting left to do, by the way, the British go down to 2, and then the initiative is going to be on the part of the French, so these guys will limber up, and then they'll point that way as their movement. That's their turn. These guys are going to move 2 inches to here, knowing full well that on the next... Oh, it's turn number 8, by the way. Knowing full well that on turn number 9, they're going to be able to move up. And then these guys can just move 2 inches. Basically, they want to be 2 inches away from these guys. So they're going to move up to, like, right there and force these guys. If they want to be able to hit this unit, see, but again, they'll just form square. So I guess the best thing that these guys can do is form squadron and then move to within 2 inches. So that'll put them right here. And I guess that's allowable because these guys are, it's 2 inches to the front, so they can't interact anyway. And that's going to be the end of the turn. We go on to turn number 9, and then these guys can take the hill, and that's really about all there is to it. These guys can pivot, and while they can't move, you know, they would be able to shoot at these guys. If these guys pivot because they're planning on doing a charge, then they're going to eat a full shot of 4 guns. And not only that, but because these guys are up on the hill, so we take, what is it? It's going to be 2 hits on them, so they're at 6. And then when they try to charge, these guys are just going to form square up on the hill. So that's the end of the scenario. They did it in just 9 turns. So maybe we needed to do the 8 and rolling and ending on a 12 or higher. That might balance the scenario a little bit. But I think that the scenario is balanced. The French were rolling just lights out today, and that made all the difference in the world. Fun little game. Highly recommend it. You know, you can see that this took me about an hour to film. Should be about a 30-minute battle. The setup was, again, only about 15 minutes, so you can work one of these in an afternoon. Just 1 corps versus 1 corps. It gets a little more complicated if you have an overall commander and 2 sub-commanders. They have to stay within 9 inches of your primary commander. So you can use it. You can use this rule set to do big battles. I really wanted to play I really want to play this one today, because as I film this, it's the anniversary of Waterloo. But I don't have enough figures. I don't have enough opponents. And I don't have enough patience, but you don't have to in order to play Absolute Emperor. A tight little Napoleonic game. Thanks for the peer pressure comment section. I wouldn't have done this without you. I'm praying for you.